On today's question of faith, can you get teenagers to stay quiet and stay off their phone for 24 hours? Hey there, everybody. This is Question of Faith. I am Deacon Mike Hayes. I am the Director of Young Adult Ministry here in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damian Ferentz, the Vicar for Evangelization.
And I am Mary Kate Glow, teacher at Walsh Jesuit High School and parishioner at St. Raphael's over in Bay Village, Ohio.
Hey, welcome aboard.
Yeah, and star shortstop for the Strongsville Vikings, right?
Yeah,
in
that's
our
our
softball
team.
league. There you go.
Yeah, and I heard in Bay Village your power was out for how many days? 5 days?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Around
us
that
too.
long.
When did yours come back? Sunday, Saturday?
Just about, yeah.
Yeah.
So late at night, though, so the next day was all putting the fridge back together.
Yeah, right.
It was on Sunday you had power back?
I didn't get it until Sunday afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And we had no hot water either.
Oh, man.
You know, it's one thing when you don't have electricity. Yeah, you get by and everything else. My stove is electric, so we couldn't cook. But the no hot water was hard. I mean, I was like, oof.
Yeah, a little penance there, like Exodus 90.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, and even the cold water wasn't great. It was like, I don't actually mind a cool shower, shall we say, but it just was not.
Yeah.
The pressure wasn't even good, right? So I was
Sorry.
like, well, no, it's okay. Hey, look, first world problems,
Yeah,
you know.
that's
And
right.
I can remember being in Nicaragua where the water just trickled out of the
Right.
faucet some days. So and the poor are the ones who really get affected by these things. So we continue to pray for them. But we're glad that our long national nightmare is over. We had a tornado here in Ohio.
I heard we had 4.
Yes, 4 touchdowns, right? Yeah, in different places.
Yeah, Parma was ripped up pretty bad. Seminary ran on generators for a few days. Some parishes had mass outside. But we're all here now. Mary Kate
right.
Glow's in the house. Not only is she the softball queen on what is the name of your team? Vikings with Maria Wankata, who's our marriage and family specialist, but she also joined us at the National Eucharistic Congress and was roomies and now like besties with Kayla Gill, our other friend on the floor. So
Absolutely, yeah.
So welcome aboard.
Yeah, more friend time, so there you have it.
So we brought you here because you are a theology teacher at Walsh Jesuit High School. And just this past year, you taught a new course for the first time, which was an elective. It's a vocation course. And part of what you did there was very challenging, especially to young people, and that is to make a Postinia retreat. So would you tell us a little bit about the course and then why you decided to make the course culminate in a retreat such as a Postinia?
Well, I do believe that the course was a result of my own life experiences and my journey with Christ, that you had that mid-20s crisis and you're wondering what is going on in the world and where I'm supposed to be. And I went off on a retreat to Nashville that just lit my heart on fire to where Christ needed and wanted me to be. And so it put me on this path of, well, you hear the word discernment and what is your vocation? And we hear that word a lot. Within our church, just vocation, and I think it usually measures up to somebody thinking about priesthood, religious life, and sometimes hidden in the shadows, but should also always be included, marriage and all of this. And so it seems like an end game, right? Like I got to reach this or find out or constantly explore, and I'm not quite there yet unless I have, arrive. And it was a wrestling match. You're thinking about this and discerning all those things. And I took time off thinking that I was, going to join a religious community. Didn't date and did that, went down that road for quite some time. But in the midst of it, this is where Christ does his work. And it's quiet work at times, even in the misery of it. And he just quieted me down and just really grounded me on this essence of something that was really attractive about religious life for me was seeing the nuns prostrate on the ground the same way that our men do for peace. Like that sacrificial giving of yourself, giving it all. That's just where my heart's been in a lot of what I do. And so just kind of navigating that and finding that. And I remember being in prayer here in the cathedral, actually, I was on a date with a guy. This is now long after some of the workings of discernment pass by with religious life. And I'm just thinking about how I'm in front of the tabernacle praying and being next to the floor where I know so many men have prostrated themselves, and just hearing in prayer that, Mary Kate, all of life, single life, married life, priesthood, religious, it all looks like that. And so it brought me that peace, and then it just circled me back into my prayer of my baptismal vows. And those have really been a highlight of my heart for the last few years. And I think they're just these long forgotten, but the most profound and essential vows of our Christianity, which then gets lived out in all those different capacities in which I know people have talked about in terms of that vocation. But the ultimate vocation is already set forth for us at baptism to, as we know, the heavenly state of our sainthood and holiness. And so just navigating those questions for myself, and also even hearing the rhetoric in our church, it's not always so clearly talked about like that. And people feel like they haven't, going back to what I was originally thinking, like you're trying to find yourself, but you're already found. And it's an essence of living out the uniqueness of what he's put forth for you, and knowing that it's not going to be the same for everybody, even though within the church we have those categorical, like beautiful vocations of in the sacramental way. And so it comes slowly, right? Like you have these conversations. I'm in the classroom every day with teenagers, and these are the questions that are on their heart. They're worried about, who am I? Who am I? What am I doing in life? We're always asking about, where are you going to college? What are you doing for a career? And all these kinds of things, which my heart breaks for them, because I feel like they got to come up with some sort of script, and then still be unsure about it. And my heart also broke twofold, because it's beyond this, right? It goes back to that baptismal notion that I was recalled earlier. So I think for a while the course had its workings quietly in my life, and then after COVID 2020, there's that spiritual yearning and longing that I really sensed, even for myself as a professional, to want to challenge myself and see what a vocations course could look like, because it is a part of the bishop's framework.
Sure.
But it's an elective, right?
It is an elective.
And they take it senior year is it seniors or no? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the course, like what actually happens.
I would say it's a journey of, is there a God out there? Who is this God? So learning about having those theological foundations, because being made in the image and likeness of him allows us to understand ourselves. So going then through human anthropology. So it's who is God, who am I, and what does this all mean? So, and it's a culmination of getting in touch, not just with knowing, but then taking the time to be with and know. So for me, it's I've tried to position it as a time where we're partnering that with immense prayer throughout the course. So even before I reach the end of where we're going with this podcast with the Postinia retreat, because a Postinia, you're asking teenagers to be on a retreat for 24 hours in silence. And every Postinia takes on a different face, but I would say traditionally people would bring in scripture, bring in a Bible with them, a journal, an icon, a crucifix, bread and water, or just something simple, sustaining, and you really want to be off on your own.
No phone.
No phone.
No teddy bear.
Some people want to bring their blanket still, right? But
leave it at the altar. That's what I would say.
To work up to that moment, the students need to know that the God that they're gonna want to separate, themselves from you're separating yourself from the world to be with Him. That he's here for your good. Who is he? And then what are the questions that are burning in my heart that I can bring to him in prayer? And so then a lot of it, and I think where so many students ask for guidance is teaching how to pray and drawing
That's right.
from that spiritual life. And having the confidence to do that, because you're going to be, alone in this room, also knowing that I can be right down the hall if you need that guidance or help. So the course is set up to, I joke with the kids, I'm like, it's really a course about you and God, because he's going to do the work as long as you provide the framework for that. And so I delve into their questions. You start off where every human starts off, like, what do you think the purpose of life is? What do you want to do? We hear the word happiness a lot. So all those buzz things that we tend to hear in our culture, you draw from, and then you just bring it back to and why do you think there's notions like that on your heart? How do you think you're designed? What do you think God wants to do with that? So it can be really fun because, what's a better class than a teenager wanting to talk about themselves and the questions that they have? Yeah. So that's, I think, where the draw starts. And then I remember last year, because I give so much credit to the students that took that course in the fall. And I go, you're like huge guinea pigs, because I remember on the first day, I think they heard murmurings about this retreat I was doing. And so they just went at it, even before I got into the syllabus. And they're like, what? We're going to have to just be in a room with bread and water. And I'm like, whoa, we're going to get there. But I think even the shock of that, the shock factor, that's intriguing.
Yeah.
I think for any of us, no matter where you're at spiritually, and then wanting to draw from the elements of the course and then bringing them to that moment.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the help that you had in preparing young people to do this 24-hour deep dive into silence without their phones. So I know you brought in a sister, you brought in a priest, you brought in different people to help prepare their hearts for this. So who were those guest lecturers?
Oh, it's numerous to name. I'm just so grateful for the community I have at Walsh Jesuit and all the adults who wanted to share their story of their faith journey and what prayer means to them and how God has directed them in ways of their life. I brought in the Mercedarian sisters to show their prayer life and what that looks like for the daily, even for a teenager, even though they're looking at sisters who are in habits, which many of my students never even saw a sister in their life. A dear friend, Father Pat Anderson, who has drawn me close in to icons in my own spirituality. He came in, he made icons with the students, nice. And it was incredible. I think in the final papers that the students wrote, many of them remarked and even quoted Father Pat in some of how he talked about his own prayer life, having coffee with Mary, having her icon there while he's beginning his day. So it's really wonderful, and the gifts that we have in and around in our own local community, the community I have at Walsh Jesuit here in the diocese, and I know for myself, there's also people out there in our diocese who are still putting on postinias for both adults and young adults, because I went on my first postinia due to a dear friend, Christy Fleming, who was a young adult leader in the diocese a number of years ago. And I think there's something cultivated here in this whole postinia experience that has been able to gain some ground in our area.
When I was a parish priest, I would choose 12 teens to make a postinia. These were the all-star teens who wanted to go deeper, and I used to take them up to the seminary, 6 boys, 6 girls. Christy Fleming was actually in my youth group. She was the only one who did it twice. But a lot of times the parents would think there's no way my kid could keep her mouth or his mouth shut that long. But if you help prepare people and teach them how to pray, it can be a tremendous experience. So you had how many, 12 or 15
12.
with you? 12, good.
No,
Perfect biblical number, yeah. And then so they went into their rooms for 24 hours approximately, and you prayed with them before. Did they have Mass beforehand?
It was a meal beforehand.
Sure, yeah. Then they went into their cell and then had 24 hours in silence and then came out, and then you celebrated Mass with them, right? And then after that, another meal, and then you unpacked what the experience was. So tell us a little bit about what the young people experienced and some of the comments that you heard, because it's hard for some people to turn their phone off for 10 minutes, let alone 24 hours, and then be in silence with no one else to talk to but God. So how did that go for them? Tell us a little bit about the feedback you received.
Unexpectedly, the first thing, even as they were signing up, they wanted to put their phones down.
Yeah.
So that can be a whole other podcast that I think...
I found that on the Kairos retreats that we take the
Right.
phones away, and they're like, it was really good being off the grid, like just putting those things away and like just being here with each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I hear you on that. And beyond, like most stories that we can share about the faith life, students would go in with expecting one thing and coming out with a surprise that God has for them. Students that thought that they were looking forward to sleeping most of the time away, but then realizing like just pouring their hearts out in journaling. I remember coming back and Father Damien was asking me about, like, how did it turn out? I'm trying to recall, like...
I remember a couple things you said. You said one student never really paid attention to the rain or the weather outside and creation. You said someone else became really grateful for his or her parents, family, gratitude. And then you also said someone paid attention to his or her own breath and heartbeat, and so had never been quiet enough. I just remembered those things and think that's exactly where we need to take young people so they can encounter the Lord in silence and have their lives transformed by His presence within them. So.
And I'm sorry, I kind of passed your own question back off to you because my mind was slipping there. But
my memory is astute.
Well, I'll owe you for that later. The thing for me, though, and I think this is the beauty of any of the work that we do, you, Mike, or Father Damien, and like me in the classroom, you just always hope it's God's work being done. And I think that's the beauty of the Postinia is that it's the silence of God's work, that it's nothing that I'm going to say. It's nothing that somebody else is going to do. It's really the solitude of something that when they come out of the room and they're sharing an experience, that's undeniable, like work of God, because there was nothing else shared other than the solitude.
Yeah, so much of ministry is actually making space for God to do His work. So,
that's right.
Deacon Mike, you asked me to save this for the show, but normally before we start the show, I usually do an Instagram post of the guest and you, and just as a way to let people know we're recording today. But I mentioned to Deacon Mike and Miss Glow that I am not doing that because I am on an Instagram and alcohol fast. I'm doing a novena working up to the Feast of Our Lady on Thursday. So, but I do that in order, not because Instagram's bad or alcohol's bad. Like, I enjoy drinking beer and I enjoy posting on social media, but I do it to make more space in my heart for the Lord to work. Yeah. And from time to time, I think we all have to do that, whether it's 24 hours of silence or an 8-day retreat or 15 minutes in the morning.
Yes.
But just giving the Lord room to work and giving Him space is really essential.
And what gets in the way, right? Sometimes those things get in the way of us giving ourselves to God, because I got to, I'm trying to keep this social media post up, or I'm choosing to do something else instead of doing morning prayer today or whatever it might be.
Also, as ministers, we often get asked to pray for people.
Yeah.
And Jesus even said some of these demons only get driven out by prayer and fasting. So when you go on Postinia or when you pray or when you fast, to add an intention to it, attach an attention to it, can actually be quite efficacious.
Yeah.
And keep you locked in, because you're not just doing it for you, but you're doing it for particular intentions and people who have asked you to pray for them. So,
and I think we forget when we work with young people sometimes that, this sounds pejorative, and I don't mean it to be, but most of our work is remedial. It's people don't have the experiences certainly that you and I grew up with. You're a little younger than us, but
millennial.
But symbols were familiar to us because our parents gave them to us. I loved what you were saying about Father Anderson's icons. That makes it come alive with them because those symbols aren't present to them all the time, even though they are in our churches. They don't understand them. They walk in and say, "What's that? And what's that? And what's that?" you're like, oh wait, you don't know those things? Hold on, let me explain, right? And then you feel like you're explaining things, and sometimes you have to, because they just don't have any experience of them.
And for them to be able to work with the priest to write or make their own icon and then pray with that icon and then keep it, or maybe gift it to someone who they were praying for on that particular Postinia, it's wonderful. And I think the other thing to take away from this is that it is possible, with proper preparation and formation and accompaniment, for young people to put their phones down and enter into silence and to develop a prayer life. But it's not going to happen just, you should have a prayer life. Right. They need to be shown.
Yeah, she preps them,
if you didn't have your own experience, which is how you started, your little witness here on the podcast, you wouldn't be able to share, because you cannot share what you have not first received.
Right.
And so I think the other thing that you mentioned to me was you have, I don't know if you have a waiting list, but are you teaching more than one section of this course this year?
It went from 1 to 4.
Okay.
Wow.
Why? Because young people experience it and they went and told other people. Yep. And that's the best way to minister. Like peer-to-peer ministry works. Yes, Miss Glow is a great teacher, and I've met some of your students are like, hoorah. She can be stern at times, but she's really fun. But it's the teens that had you in class and had this experience who go and tell other people. I mean, that's how the word got out about the resurrected Lord.
Right.
People witnessed him, and then they told other people.
That's right.
It's so key. I mean, and especially in this, now we are in the missionary phase of the Eucharistic revival. Yeah. It's about getting out and letting people know the good news.
Mm-hmm. So. Indeed. And so you're at Walsh Jesuit. Tell us a little bit about the chapel at Walsh Jesuit for those who have never been there.
It's so unique.
And you have cool, two, right? You have a daily one and...
Wasn't the daily mass, you showed it to me once, it's behind. Don't you gather there for the daily mass?
Oh,
and then...
yeah. I know what you're referencing now. So where our tabernacle is within the chapel, it sits as a smaller chapel within the chapel.
I gotcha.
So we call it the Adoration Chapel within the chapel of our North American Martyrs. Yes. Being a Jesuit institution, those are our patrons. Yep. And so... if anybody has been to Toledo St. John's, I have never been myself, but I hear that we're kind of twins of one another, our campuses. So our chapel has this effect where the ceiling goes up, like straight up through the roof, and it shoots out, and we have a cross on top, so we call it the cross and crown. It's really beautiful.
It was built in 1964, is that right, your school?
Yeah.
So similar to St. Columkill, it's also... Tale des Chardins, and it's the title of a Flannery O'Connor story, Everything That Rises Must Converge. So that's like written into the architecture of this thing.
Got it. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so it has this circular feel, though, but drawing up, altar right and center in our pews, gather around it, and everybody is welcome to gather with us. We have daily mass. We're so fortunate, and I am so grateful for our Jesuits to come in every morning at 7:30. So students, teachers, parents, even friends of the community walk in, join us for Mass. It's wonderful.
How about Tole Lege? Shout out to our friends Kate and Natalie. Do they ever come to morning Mass, or should they?
They've been there.
They've been there. Okay. Maybe they'll come more often even this year, their senior year. I met them this summer.
7:30. Show some commitment when you're getting up that early when school doesn't start till 8:15.
Exactly. And hey, something that takes commitment has been our softball league all year, which you have been a part of. So it's time for this week's softball update. All right, what a final regular season week. Let's start with two makeup games on Friday night. Catching Flamingos knocked off Strongsville 16-13. Jimmy Ludwig staking his claim for consideration for league MVP. He went 3 for 3, 5 big RBIs, a grand slam, and a 7-run fourth inning. Rutger Delm also had 3 hits on the day. A 3-run blast for Ben Schaefer and a losing cause for the Vikings kept things close. But now Strongsville is behind the 8 ball. They needed a win on Sunday and some help to have a path for the playoffs. We'll have more on that in just a bit. A wild one in the nightcap. The Westside Whitecaps took a 9-4 lead into the 6th inning. Bobby Bolin a grand slam. Logan Feldkamp 2 RBIs, but Ite came roaring back with a 5-run 6th inning. Matt Garvin and David Smith each with a double. Dan Wallace with an additional RBI single tied things up at 9. A double by Franco Alonso started the bottom of the sixth, and then a ground out by Kevin Doherty ended up with a wild throw going down the third base line to score Alonso with the winning run. The Whitecaps still only one loss now after this 10-9 win. Let's head towards Sunday, and the regular season action there started out with the Flamingos with an easy 7-1 win over the Parma Peacocks. Jimmy Ludwig, Ed Drabeck, each with 2 RBIs. Now Parma needs some help to get into the playoffs, but stay tuned. The Whitecaps played the Chosen Ones in the second game, and it was not for the faint of heart. A 6-run third inning capped by Logan Feldkamp's 3-run homer seemed to have things in hand for Westside, but then a 6-run fifth inning led by Johnny Reynolds' 3-run home run brought the Chosen Ones back from the dead. In the bottom of the sixth, Chris Rinderly had a 3-run walk-off triple that ended the game for the Cardiac Kids 15-14. The Whitecaps take the regular season crowns, and they push Chosen Ones to the 3rd seed in the playoffs. They lose a bye. The St. Vitus Lions took on Big League Chew in the next game. They raced past them 6-5. Another cardiac game, a walk-off single by David Harvin, kept Vitus's playoff hopes alive. 3 hits and a losing cause for Matt Liberatore as well. The St. Joe's Vikings knocked off Grapes of Wrath easily 13-2. They needed this one to stay alive. Phil Wancata, 3 RBIs. His wife Maria, another 2 RBIs and 3 hits on the day. Mary Kate Glow, Luke Brown, Kristen Tubbs, all with 2 hits. A great team effort by the Vikings. We'll see if they make the playoffs momentarily. The final game had Ite knocking off the Blue Scapulars 19-10. David Smith, 5 big RBIs. Andrew Kukla and Matt Garvin added 4 RBIs each. Kukla and Garvin also with home runs, and that Garvin a double away from hitting for the cycle in that game. But now the fun begins. The playoffs. Westside, Flamingos, Chosen Ones, and Big League Chew all clinch playoff spots. That's the seeding order as well. But 5 other teams finish at 3 and 4. So we had to head to a tie-breaking format well into the night. Head-to-head games are the first tiebreaker. So here are the clear winners. The Peacocks, Vitus, and Ite all had 2 wins in that head-to-head matchup. Strongsville only had 1, and the Scapulars had 3 losses despite their 2 wins. So they get eliminated by league rules. So the Peacocks, Vitus, and Ite now have to face a tie-breaking head-to-head matchup there to see who can get the last 2 playoff spots. Well, it turns out the Peacocks are 2-0. They beat both Vitus and Ite, so they advance and clinch the 5th seed. Now, Vitus and Ite did not play each other, and we have opted to ask Vitus and Ite to play a 1-game playoff this Sunday early on before playoff Sunday actually starts. So we'll have a 6-7 game, if you would, at 11 o'clock at a new venue, Meyer Park in Seven Hills, Ohio. Vitus for Ite for the 6th seed of the playoffs. And that follows a full game of softball. Big League Chew has the 4th seed. They'll take on the Parma Peacocks and their former star player Joe Vicario, who started his own team this year. We'll see if there's any revenge that happens there. The Chosen Ones will take on the winner of that early game between Vitus and Ite. Then the winners will advance to take on the Flamingos in the Whitecaps in the late games, and of course the championship happens at 6:30. So come on out to Seven Hills at Meyer Park, where all day long Veranova Health will have free food and drink. We thank them for their sponsorship, along with Archangel Outfitters, who will be selling their cool shirts and more on site. It'll be a great day. Pray for good weather. We'll have an all-star game update along with all the finals action next week. I'm Deacon Mike Hayes. This is your softball update. All right, playoffs this Sunday. Sorry, MK. Guys just fell a little
You're
short
out
there.
Wait, I thought if the one team lost and they won, they were in.
No, it would go to, so 5 teams were tied
Oh.
for the last 2 playoff spots at 3 and 4.
But you lost to some of the
So-
teams that.
Yes, so head-to-head, their record wasn't as good as
Man.
3 of the other teams. So 2 teams were eliminated in the first tiebreaker by head-to-head. And then the second one, one team made it in because they had a better record than the other 2 teams did head-to-head. And then finally, we just approached the last 2 teams and said, look, your run differential is so close, which is the second tiebreaker. And I hate that tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you win games 20-3, and sometimes you win the game 6-5.
Yeah.
And the 6-5 game, you probably fought so much harder. So we said, would you guys come early on Sunday and just have a 1-game playoff, and that'll be the last seed for the playoff? And they agreed to do that. So there you go. That's how we settled it.
Are you sad? I mean, this is a three sport Hall of Famer from Magnificat High School and a college Hall of Famer at Ashland. She has the most kills and spikes of all time. Is that right?
Yeah, with the digs.
Digs, whatever those are.
That's right.
Anyway,
we got the cool terms in volleyball.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's great. But you had a good year, so
yeah. To see
try again next year.
Absolutely.
And Maria and Phil must not be happy either. They're highly competitive, but it's good for your humility. So anyway, we're going to talk about the scriptures now.
Gosh.
Humility.
I need it too, believe me.
Yeah,
to see your reaction in real time. Wow. There you go. Dear friend.
I was hoping.
In all seriousness, it was great having you folks as part of the league this year. Hope you come back next year. Bread of Life Discourse continues in our scriptures this week in the Gospel of John. I found it interesting. Just last week, they said that the Jewish people murmured about Jesus. Mm-hmm. This week, the Jewish people are quarreling about Jesus. So it's sort of gotten deeper. Before they were just talking about it. Now there's divisions. Mm-hmm. Now one side thinks one thing, one side thinks the other, and they're quarreling about this. And so, is there a difference between our murmurs and our quarrels, and how does that work?
I think murmur is an onomatopoeia because it's murmur.
That's right, yeah.
Just a sound.
I'm sticking with the theme I had last week, and I've been riffing on this for a couple weeks. Like, I want to live forever. Who doesn't? Like, no one wants when they die to be just out and kaput, no life after this. We have a desire for eternal life, and that desire is the desire that God wants to meet with his very flesh. So I love the Eucharist for that reason and many others.
MK, what stood out to you?
How many weeks are we going on with John 6?
Yeah, I think it's 6 total. So this is
total,
4 or 5.
I think there's a reason for that. And so just sitting with that as a church, I think, is important in and of itself, that 6 Sundays are dedicated to what Christ is saying here. And as a part of what I've always noticed in this part of John's gospel is count out how many times flesh is mentioned, or flesh and blood. And I think in the dedication of the time that the church is giving us to reflect on this, we can find ourselves with the apostles and with the Jews toiling and thinking and bringing it to prayer and reviving something in our own lives spiritually.
Yeah, perfect. So
great.
That'll be Bread of Life Discourse continues at readings. Assumption coming up on Thursday, so I get to Mass on Thursday.
Yeah, and if you want, come down to Little Italy at Holy Rosary. Yes. Bishop Malesic has the Mass. Someone you may or may not know is preaching the homily, and it may or may not be good. We'll see what happens.
Well, if God does it.
I'm dusting off my really special cassock for that day because we're going to go process in the streets, and Bishop's wearing his cassock, so I'm going to wear mine. Yeah,
special cassock.
Bringing out
it's got the fascia.
Oh, yeah, got you. Yeah.
And because I have one that I use for teaching that's old and kind of ratty, but this is like my classy one. So I might even get a haircut for Thursday.
Wow.
Since you're in Little Italy, are you bringing out any of the gear that you wore in Rome?
No, because that's academic gear. Got
it.
And it's not liturgical gear. It's not liturgical gear. When I defended my dissertation, I had a wreath of laurel leaves I wore on my head, but that's long faded and withered.
But not your PhD.
That's right.
Or your book.
Exactly. MK, thanks for joining us. It's great having you.
It's great. Thank you.
And we'll have this and a whole lot more next time here on Question of Faith.